Hey here, JB here. Hope I was doing outstanding Wednesday, January 21st, 329 on this fine afternoon talk. Really quick about the market. Some names I'm looking at go from there. S&P up 1.15% here. SPY sitting at 685. What a difference an hour makes, right? A little more than an hour ago, markets were on the cusp. Felt like, okay, we have a little pressure. Things could really accelerate to the downside. SPY was chopping around between 679 and 680. And then pretty much right at about 220 or so, Trump came out and said that holding off on the tariffs, right? And then supposedly had a good conversation with NATO chief, and that they're going to work some deal out. Who knows what that all looks like? But for the market, we big spike, right? So surprising as it is, I would say surprising, but SPY came all the way up to 686, then almost up to 689, and it's pulled back here. It's down to 685.21, so $4 off the highs, but a massive reversal. Impressive stuff. S&P is still down 1% on the week, so we'll see how today plays out, or at least the rest of the day. And tomorrow was the Greenland situation, the tariffs, just an excuse, right? Was the market going to sell off anyway, or now that that kind of possible headwind gets removed, can the market start to find some footing and we head to new all-time highs? Well, I will find out tomorrow and Thursday. Tomorrow we get PCE data, Intel earnings after the close, and then then the Fed meeting I think is on the 28th. Is it the next? Yes. So I talked about this morning. The thing that concerns me is the yields. So uh, not looking too bad here. Let's see. I didn't even pull up the 10-year before. But that's kind of overall markets. Let's see here. 684 in the SPY, 684.76. Hang on, of course I don't have it here. I'll tell you, yields are down just a little bit. So, all right. So we'll see how the rest of today and tomorrow play out. Volatile, right? 680 all the way up to 688. So you're talking nearly a 1.5% move in a matter of an hour, and now we're pulling. Do we find some support here with this pull? Where does the SPY going to settle at the end of the day? Hopefully, 683, 684 would be nice. Ideally, I was like to see 686. But if you had told me this morning, with the market, I think we're at 683 around the open. Where'd we open this morning? Of course, hang on, I don't have all my stuff here. Did we open 680? Yeah, we're at 60, so maybe 684. All right. Well, I don't want to get too much of that. All right. So just quick on individual names. And, I always talk about always be hedging. So Monday was difficult. Well, Tuesday, because the market gapped down, the news over the weekend. So didn't have too many positions on in regards to open positions. Most of the positions I did have, I either locked in freebies, riding in freebies, or VKTX, SSYS, Serve Robotics. I just have those 23s left. On the and one more. Sorry, Moderno's more. I always struggle pronouncing this name, Moderna, however you pronounce it, but just hitting high. So trying to trade some put hedges yesterday. I was looking at Broadcom. I explained it yesterday afternoon, pretty much same time as today. How even if you got puts at the start of the day, been very hard to make money on the put hedges on Broadcom. So again, same situation today. I'm watching SPY's giving back its gain 684, trading down to 680. The plan was if we got down to 677, I was going to scale into puts. But Broadcom looked weak. So considering didn't want to be chasing, and I was sitting there at 326 or so, I got those 305 puts. I was actually looking at 307.50s or the 310s. 305s look interesting because uh, multi-bagger possibility. Or if it gets down to 315, it'll probably be a couple 100%, 200%. And you start looking at support resistance. 320 is a big spot for Broadcom. So if it broke under there, I think it would escalate to the downside. Sure enough, it starts to move. Breaks, I think it was 324. My puts were up 50% or so, but then the SPY just it flatlined, sitting there at 679 and change, couldn't break through. I've seen it before. I posted in the chat room too. The reason I exited was because of the SPY and the fact that premiums weren't going up much after the initial move. Closed them out for a small gain, and sure enough, we have that little tweet out. Oh, well, the update in regards to Greenland, and markets went bonkers. So yeah, it's good to have a hedge on, but at the same token, you got to be able to accept the possibility that those news-related events might just cause your position to go haywire, right? Could have went the other way, right? There could have been some other news. Who knows? So here's a little chart here. This is Broadcom 610 puts, 310 puts since Tuesday, right? So Broadcom's down $20 from the start of Tuesday, and the puts until just a little while at, I guess, 2 o'clock or so, they were flat. So very hard to play the puts is the moral of that story. always be holding, right? Sometimes holding is the hard part for an option, but the harder part is when the premiums aren't going up and you're stuck, and then you get a bounce and you lose money. So anyway, thankfully I closed the Broadcom puts out. That's the moral story on that one. So just other names. So this morning I put on the watch list. I was going to play Netflix for a bounce, right? Similar story. Netflix started the rally at 83, 84. My calls were going up, looked great. And then it flatlined. And again, my concern is that if it starts to dip more, the premiums are going to come out quicker than they came in, close them out for pretty much flat. Uh, and then sure enough, goes up to 85, but then starts to fade. And even when it was higher than when I exited, the puts were the calls were in the red. And now they're 50%, even less than that now, even with the stock higher than when I exited. So I don't know if I'm going to try to trade Netflix. I was actually looking at 91 strikes when I exited the 88s. I was looking for 91s for next week, but I'm trying to look at the chart and the sentiment and all that fun stuff when it comes to Netflix. I'm like, is this going to trade to 90? If there was a chance for it to really start to go, I thought a reversal this morning, a red to green move, and then you can say, okay, the Bulls are back in town on Netflix. Doesn't look like that's the case. So I'll revisit at some point, but I'm not going to try and not going to try and trade it today. So that was Netflix. And then just later in the day, Moderna, however you pronounce it, always been a great story. A lot of it's their cash position, right? They stepped on a pile of gold poopies back in the COVID era, right? All those billions of dollars of government money and subsidy, all that money coming into them for the vaccines. Um, and then, COVID went away, right? So depends on who you talk to. So that story's kind of done in regards to the vaccine. And I still think there's like a negative stigma associated with the company, but now they're pivoting a little bit, right? And I think so. The cancer study, positive data there, and you see at the start of the year. The start of this year, just going bonkers. And some of you could say, there's flu is, I always say this is the worst flu in decades. There's always those stories, right? And of course, the people who do have the flu think it's the worst season. But then you have these names that start to rally, and this is one of them. But there's continuation. I'm watching it today in relative strength with the rest of the market. I'm looking, do I get later strikes? Do I get close strikes, closer in money? I went and got those 52 calls, and I was trying to close them out to cover costs. I don't even see. If I get a chance before the close, I might look to lock some in. But I think if this goes, I think I posted it. If it goes to $50, they're 100%. So, and then I think it has like $8 billion in cash, and it's like a $17 billion company. I'll have to do more digging after the close, but I was kind of thought process adding some of those because sometimes you see these names and it's like, a boulder getting shoved downhill and it has momentum. And I think it's like, it's going to be very hard for the momentum to come out. And because of that, I think it heads 50, 52, and maybe you get some FOMO. So yeah, short interest, right? There's still 20% short interest on the name. So those are the kind of ingredients that I like to trade for, especially high lotto speculative names that expire on Friday. So that was the rationale behind those. Hopefully I'll be able to get some out to cover costs before the end of the day. Other names here, Roku Teasen. I think it was 104.75 was yesterday's high. Tried to break that in the morning and then reverse course down all the way down to 102, and now it bounced. Still have hope here on the calls. Maybe it just needs a kick and upgrade, but 2 days left to expiration. SSYS is back over $11. Still holding my strikes there. February, Marches. Serve Robotics, how disappointing, right? All the way up to 1480, and I almost 1460 at the open. I almost went and got some February 17 calls. I was that close. Thankfully, sat on my hands, white knuckles and all. Made sure I didn't put a trade in, and it just reversed. 1462 at after the open, down to 1226 at 1 o'clock. Divisive name, highly shorted name. You have people, again, I use the analogy like they think it's a tin can roaming the metro markets delivering food, right? That's kind of the picture I get from the bears who spin the story. Maybe it is, right? Uh, I don't think so. And I was talking about this morning with their acquisition, $29 million acquisition. They still have $310 million in cash. So a small percentage of the cash hoard to try and get into another addressable market on a business that I think, is legit. I'm not a nurse. I don't work in a hospital. If you've been to a hospital, there's a lot of different, people go in for a lot of different reasons. Nurses are like kind of a backbone of the hospital. So to have a robot that helps assist with bringing things to places, helping with supplies and all that fun stuff. It's just, you would think it just makes sense. So the fact that they think that they can scale out 200 to 400,000 a robot or a hospital, 6,000 plus hospitals in the United States, you do the math. Yeah, so I think it's a great story, but here's the stock says no. One of these days it'll say yes. Hopefully then I'll be adding more strikes, but just continue to be patient there, adding more calls there. VKTX, I mean, it's still down 1% here. Still have those. So when I got those VKTX January strikes, I got them as like a lotto, right? Because it's running on the JP Morgan conference. You had NVO coming out with some comments saying, hey, we might do some acquisition in the GLP-1 space if their GLP-1 asset is better than ours, which VKTX is. So you saw those names running. So I did those January strikes. And then, you know, I'm like, I still want to have a position just in case there's more either speculation and or there is actual M&A. And I think if there is an M&A in space, it's going to be, uh, I hate to say it, structured therapeutics, right? GPCR, but yeah, I'll continue to look for opportunities there. But I'm just gonna, I'm looking for strikes. I'm like, I'll just continue to hold the February calls, and the premiums are holding up. Uh, yeah, I mean, it's tough. The bid ask is 25 by 50, so you can't get out. You get hit. All right, Moderna's hitting highs here. I might look to get some of those out. All right. Anyway, that's it. Tomorrow 686, right? We're at 685. We're actually just hit 686 on the SPY. Tell me sometimes the charts work. I mean, I'm not a believer that you can trade purely on charts. Some people say you can. I guess so. I I look at charts as a history lesson, right? And it's just part of the toolbox in trading. The charts, the fundamentals, technicals, the macro environment, the news, all those things together, the filings, the short interest, analysts, and then if you're able to find an edge using all those tools in your tool belt, good for you, right? Charts are one of those things I think an edge. And when I look at, people use other indexes to help with their tracking, the SPY to me has always worked out. So anyway, let's have a great day, folks. Rock and roll.